Hello everyone and welcome to our most recent webinar, or our latest webinar here for the CBAA series of webinars brought to you with the wonderful support of the Community Media Training Organisation. Tonight's topic, getting started with sponsorship sales. Our presenter is Nathaniel Garvin, who's been involved in fundraising and sales in community radio for 15 years, first as station manager for Coast FM, and then as the general manager at Ultra 106.5 FM. He's now the owner and founder of the Radio Resource. I'll pop a link for that in the instant message box in just a little bit, and you can click on that and go directly to it. But before I let Nathaniel get started, I've got to let you know we've got a packed March in regards to webinars. March 14th, your guide to contributing to the National Features and Documentary Series. Now, hopefully, for people who might be interested in that sort of thing, the Features and Documentary Series is back again for 2018. That webinar will feature representatives of the Community Radio Network who will give you a bit of a good idea about what you need to have as part of the piece you're producing up for the National Features and Documentary Series. And we'll also have notable people who were involved in that last year who will be able to give you a bit of tips from the producer's point of view. So that's March 14th. Then March 28th, 2 weeks later, The Smell of an Oily Rag, 10 tips for broadcasting on a budget, a session at which we'll have representatives from smaller stations all around the nation who will be there to share their knowledge in regards to how to get the most bang for their buck. And we all know that one of the hallmarks of the community broadcasting sector is that we're providing quality content with limited resources, and that will have a closer examination of that. If you are from a smaller station and you're doing inventive things with the little resources that you have, please feel free to come along to that one and let us know what you guys are up to. But now we should get started with some sponsorships and sales. In this webinar, we're going to learn to increase radio sponsorship income, make your brand more attractive, get started on positive relations with potential sponsors. And you'll note that I haven't changed the subject then from the last webinar that was on there. That's because I'm a professional. Now, what I'd better do then is, as soon as I'm recording this, Nathaniel, I better give it over to your screen, mate, so you can get things started. And we can get rid of my typo.
Lovely. Let's do this. This is going to be fun. Alrighty. And is my webcam showing too?
Your webcam will be up and running in just 1 second. Let him rip. Hopefully that's request has been sent to you by now. Send webcam request.
Share. Perfect.
Excellent. And the floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen. Nathaniel Garvin.
Brilliant. And okay, thanks guys. Thank you everyone for joining me. Now there's going to be time for some questions and answers at the end of the process. Just for the flow of things, I probably won't get too much into the questions as we go, just because otherwise I'll lose my place and kind of get stuck, and it won't be as fun for you guys. So I'll get into some Q&A at the end, and feel free to type in questions as we go, but I probably won't really address them until we get closer to the end, if that's all right. So let me just kind of give you a little bit more of a background about who I am. I have been in radio, as Danny said, for about 15 years. I managed Coast FM on the northwest coast of Tas, and then managed a radio station in Hobart for 10 years. And around about 2 years ago, I took the crazy leap and jumped out and started a consulting business, I guess. I was coming up to my 40th birthday, and I must have had a close to midlife crisis type thing. So I thought, rather than just working and serving one organisation, I want to make more of an impact with my life. So I thought, why don't we start something and see if we can share some of the knowledge that I've had and some wins that I've had through the years. And now I've been working with not-for-profits and radio stations around the country, and really just trying to help them to get more sustainable. So like I said, Ultra and Coast FM, and over the past 2 years, I've been working with 38 different organisations and helped them to raise a bit over $1.7 million in donations, and helping radio stations with their sponsorship, just replicating some of the lessons that I've learnt in my years of radio, where one station in particular in the past 12 months was able to go from $2,000 to $3,000 in sponsorship to $13,000 to $14,000 in sponsorship per month and that was just over the 12-month period, and that's quite conceivable sort of growth that most stations could make. And part of what I want to do tonight is kind of run you through some of the steps it's going to take to get you to do that in your own station. I started this radio resource website to try and share some of the knowledge that I've come across, but not just my knowledge. I also want to see if I can find others who have great insights as well and bring that knowledge to you through this website, just because I spent 15 years in community radio, and I know how it can be kind of challenging. And for a long time there, afters wasn't even a possibility for training, and there wasn't many opportunities for training. When I first started out, the CMTO wasn't really on my radar. I don't think it was actually existed back in. Danny, you can tell me, was it around in 2000 or 2000? I guess is when I started.
Sorry, I had my microphone off and just had to click the button to turn it off. No, we did have a registered training organisation that was involved with the CBAA, but the CMTO, I'd suggest, is a regular recent entity. I think they're about 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, that's right. That sounds about right. So for me, I would have valued it if people could have shared their knowledge with me. I think it'd be great if we could capture some of the knowledge that's out there, not just mine, but others as well, and share it through this resource. So part of what I want to do tonight is kind of kick off a top-level view of what it's going to take to get started with sponsorship sales in your market. And first of all, the very first question you've got to ask yourself is, do you actually have a product? Now, when I first started out at both the stations I managed, that their brand hadn't been managed and the station itself hadn't been managed particularly well. And so the audience wasn't particularly big. And in one case, in the second station, when I did a survey, it had 1% market share or something like that. So it was within the margin of error. There was, it could have been the margin of error, which is the latitude of that allows for whether it actually exists or not. Like it was 3 for that survey, and it was actually a margin of error, well, below the margin of error. So we could have had no audience at all, which kind of tells you about where we are at. And so if that's where you're finding yourself as a station where you don't have much of an audience right now, yes, you can get going with sales, but there's some things that you probably want to do to try and start to shape up your brand so that it's worth selling. And it's not super easy to get going if you don't have a product. But that said, tonight we're going to share with you some methods that you can start selling anyway. But there is an article I've written on the website, the radio resource, that talks about what you can do before you get started with doing radio sales and testing whether you've got a product to sell. So there's actually some sample questions in a survey you can send out to find out whether or not you actually have a product. And that you can just do that with, if you use something like SurveyMonkey, just use that, send it out to your Facebook audience, send it out to your mailing list, and ask them a bunch of questions to see whether or not you actually have something that businesses are likely to pay money to support. If you do have a product, then that's great. You can go ahead, all guns blazing. If you don't, I highly recommend there's some further steps you can do to kind of quickly move your radio station to make it look more professional, so that it is something that businesses would be happy to spend money on. And I'm not saying that. I don't think there's any particular format of a radio station that is more able to be sold. I think every station has its strengths and weaknesses. So there's some generalist stations that have more general playlist type formatting, and there's other radio stations that have more block programming. It kind of doesn't matter. The thing that matters most is your radio station being true to what it tells everyone it's going to be, and is it going to? Yeah, good. I'm just seeing some comments through that. I won't get distracted by that anymore. But is your radio station being true to what it tells everyone it's going to be? And if it is, then be really loud about it. If it's going to be a block program radio station, make sure that you very clearly identify that on your website. that this is there's 80 presenters on this website, on this radio station, and talk about the variety that you're going to be able to hear, and talk about what do you call it, appointment listenership. Like there's going to be programs that people are going to dial in for every Friday at 4 o'clock because they know it's there. Make sure that you are bold about that and sell it as hard as you can. There's some ideas that are on that particular article that I can share with you. But one of the things I want to talk about also is over this next 4 weeks, I actually want to give you more information as well. So if you do want to get all my resources and all these tips in a more detailed way, over the next 30 days during March, I'm going to share a whole lot more content through the Radio Resource website. But we'll touch on most of it tonight, so you get an idea. You can go and sign up over at that website, which will give you the link for at the end of this program, and we'll be able to go more in depth with all this content. And I've got some more video content that we'll provide to you this month as well. But talking about the things you need to get started, let's just dive straight into the nitty-gritty and talk about some of the tools and the resources that you need. First of all, you're going to need a CRM, a client relationship management tool. One of the things that really slows sales and salespeople down is if they don't have the right tool, if they don't have any tool at all to manage their contacts, then very quickly they're going to be unorganized, and they're going to miss appointments, and they're going to really not maximize the effort they're putting in. Equally, if you get a bad CRM, like a client relationship management software, then you'll find that they end up spending all their time doing data entry and not getting out and doing sales. So my preference is for a system that is really simple, as simple as possible. But I do highly recommend that you actually get a CRM in place as a first priority. My personal preference for salespeople is one by the group who made Basecamp project management tool. They're a group called 37 Signals, and they made a CRM called Highrise HQ, and I like it just because it's just so darn simple, and I recommend it to all my clients. Salesforce is another one that is widely used. I don't like it as much because I think it's actually slower to use, more clicks, and not as fast, but it is widely used, and that is something worth considering. Another thing that you're going to need is a script brief. Now, when you make your first sale, you are going to, when you make your first sale, you're going to need to be able to take the order. So how are you going to go from the point of making that first sale to actually getting that script on air? So you'll need to actually have a template ready to take down the details of the script. So you're going to need things like, what's their unique selling proposition? It's a good question to ask. What's the thing that makes them stand out compared to all the other plumbers, say, or all the other cafes? What makes them different? You're going to also want to have in there what's mandatory. What's the thing that this business is really going to want included in this script? And then how are people going to take action? Do we want to send them to a phone number, a website, or do we want to send them to an address, or tell them to Google, or find us on Facebook? Whatever it is, what is that call to action going to be looking like? There's some of the things you'd have in a script brief. I've got some of these resources that I'll share with you also, providing you can give me your emails or sign up through, probably best to sign up through the website so I can capture it that easily. Also, another tool that's going to be really useful for you to have, and I always, even though we've got a CRM in place, unless you are really fancy and deck your salespeople out with a tablet to take out to their client calls, a simple piece of paper with a grid on it that just has business name, contact, and notes laid out will help in them keeping a track of their calls. Because the worst thing you can have is a salesperson who goes out and does 10 calls but forgets 5 of them. So giving them the resources to manage themselves, and then when they come back, they can enter that data into the CRM so that it's not, the information's not lost and it's kept in a usable way. But that log sheet, it's a very simple thing, but it can make a real difference in terms of managing the sales process and making sure that you don't miss out on opportunities. This is a tricky one, this next one, scheduling sponsorship spots. So you get that first sale, you write the script brief, you get that piece of production made up, but then how do you go about scheduling that thing? Because there's a number of stations. If you're just getting started with sales right now, you may well not have a scheduling platform in place for scheduling sponsorship spots. Now, if you do, that's fine. That's great. If you don't, there are actually ways of getting around it without actually having to have a scheduling package in place to start with. If you are going to invest in a scheduling package, which is worth doing, then the one I recommend most often is Natural Log. It seems to be the go-to for many stations, and it seems to be useful and easy enough to use. And there's a one-time purchase cost, and it's pretty expensive. It's $1,000 or so. But if that's going to be too steep for you because you're just getting started, then what I'd highly recommend you do, depending on if you're using a computer to do playout, if you've got a program like Simian or one of the other platforms that do have like a cart style system within them, in the computer-based software for playing audio, you can have carts. There might be some other names depending on the type of software that you're using, but basically it's a grouping tool where you can put bits of audio in it, and then you can schedule that one cart many times throughout the day. What you can do if you're wanting to schedule airtime without having a sponsorship scheduling platform, you can use that cart and place it in your logs. Say, for instance, you might place that 10 times in the day, and then you know that that's going to play 10 times. So you can put 10 different sponsorship spots in there. And that way, you know that they'll get played once, or you might put 5 in and they'll get played twice. And it's a way of scheduling it. And then if you're going to do that, you just keep a sheet of when they went in and when they have to come out, and you'll just pull them in and out manually. We use that. There's a particular sponsorship package that I've designed that works well with that system, works really well with that system, so that particularly for small stations who are wanting to get going before they've got enough money to invest in that software, they can get going, and that method will actually be a bonus for them in how this particular package runs. That leads me into my next part, which is your first sales package. Now, if I'm going too fast with all this, don't worry. I am intending this month to go really deep with all this and give you all this content in depth through my website, also through the Facebook page as well. And just if you have any questions at all, I'd love to get any questions via email or via the Facebook page as well. Just want to really resource you if we can. But talking about the first package, your first sales package. So I was just talking to you about the idea of using either Natural Log or a scheduling platform like that, or using a cart system to place the number of spots throughout the day, and it's going to be played that number of spots, that number of times. Well, the very first package that we highly recommend you use is what I call the club package, which I've used a number of times for stations that are in a real pickle, have no sponsorship at all, very little, and we've been able to grow them very quickly using this package. And basically the concept is this, that we section off, say, a percentage of the airtime that's available. Maybe it's 30 or 40% of the overall station airtime, and that might give you, I don't know how many spots. There's 180 spots a day if it's 6 a.m. to midnight, and then 7 times 7 days ish. So it's probably, I don't know, someone who's good at maths can tell me that it's probably 1,200 spots or something thereabouts. So if you did 40% of that, say for instance, then that would be what is that? I don't know. We'll call it 300 spots or something like that in the week that is part of the club package. Well, what we do is we say the first people who sign up to the club package get a share of all the leftover airtime, up to 10 spots a day, but they're only paying for 2 spots a day. And so it really favors early adopters. We've used this package over and over again, and it just sells itself because it's kind of like the bonus. It's like the bonus, giving away bonuses, but there's a real benefit to doing it right now because it's a locked off amount of airtime, and the people who get in early are going to receive many, many more spots than the people who come in towards the end. So later on, it's still going to be highly valuable because people will be getting double what they pay for, maybe. But in the first instance, they're going to be getting 5 times what they pay for. The great thing about this is in the early parts of signing up someone for sponsorship, or signing up clients for sponsorship, you don't have many people on air. So the more you can get on air, the better it's going to sound. If you have more spots on air, funnily enough, we did a number of tests with this because we actually were a little bit concerned about having the spot playing too many times on air. But we actually found that our audience really appreciated having those spots. I guess part of that was because we were getting more clients on as well. So it wasn't just static, and they weren't just there for a long time getting spots when, we got more on kind of quickly. But in the short term, it made people think that we were being successful. And because they thought we were being successful, they thought, oh, there must be something to that. So they made it easier for them to purchase, which was fantastic. But the great thing is say, for instance, if they're getting a share of leftover airtime, you can start out that your price at a higher price, but they're getting the bonuses. So the effective rate is low. But by the time, I'm rushing over things. I'm sorry if this gets confusing. We can ask some questions later on if that's helpful. But the effective price becomes better as more people get on air because the share is getting smaller. So, where they start out getting 5 times what they pay for, towards the end, they get exactly what they pay for rather than anything more. And they don't mind at all because there's a demonstrated market value. So obviously, if you're now full on air and you're getting what you pay for, then everyone else thinks it's a good idea. And so it must be a good idea is the kind of thinking. You will lose a couple of people who really love having that absolute bargain in the first place. But at the end of the day, when we did this at Ultra in Hobart, we started out with 20 clients on air, and by the time we got to the end of that first 4 months, we were up to 64 clients on air, and that was a really great peak for us, and that kind of grew very quickly with that club package. So that's your first package that I would recommend you get. And when I say it's your first package, there's actually two versions of the thing that I would highly recommend you have. One is a runner station version, and one is a prime version. And I've got templates for all those that I can give you as well. Along with that, you're going to need a phone script and I talk about a phone script because it's one of the best ways to teach a salesperson about how to sell. And when I'm talking about teach a salesperson how to sell, I'm talking about someone who doesn't have a lot of experience in sales. And I'll get into that a bit down the track. But basically, it'd be great if you had the right sorts of words and the right sorts of questions to ask that you can give someone, and they'll be able to bring a business up. And if they just follow it through, they'll generally be able to, out of 100 calls, be able to get 20 strong leads, and out of 20 strong leads, they're about to get 1 sale. It's kind of, they're the figures for someone who's not very good yet. But if you think about it, if you can do 100 calls per week, which is what most salespeople can do if it's on a full-time basis, then you're getting 1 sale a week. And if they're say 12-month packages, then over the course of a year, you end up with 50 clients on there. That's kind of how it works. So it's a kind of a slow build potentially. If you run a package like the one we were just talking about before, you can actually make it run faster. But that kind of gives you an idea. In terms of the phone script, basically you want to, there's some things that you don't want to say when you're talking to someone about radio. You don't want to ask them, you don't want to be too blunt about it. You want to be courteous, and everyone's had experiences of salespeople who they just want them to leave. So it's really nice if you can make it all, direct enough so that they have the information, but friendly and not like a telemarketer. So yeah, we've got a bit of resource that we can share with you about how to do that. So there's some of the top level tools that you're going to need. There are 2 more tools in this as well that I'll tell you about. They kind of fit in the next section a bit better, so we'll jump to that one now. Okay, so it turns out I should have been flicking through. Sorry about that. This is the comedy interval where I'll flick through these little different parts. Yay. All right, off to the next part. Here we go. So hiring a salesperson. Now, with hiring a salesperson, first of all, I want to talk to you about the structure of the employment agreement, because this is something that if you understand how to do it, makes it much easier to get going with sales. And this is often one of the big barriers for radio stations wanting to get going with sales, is they think they need to get a full-time salesperson, but in actual fact, I would highly, highly recommend, if you're just starting with radio sales, that you get someone on 20 hours a week, 4 hours a day, and that has to be 5 days a week, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Doing it this way, it lessens the overall risk. So it's going to be much faster for you to get a return on investment, because you don't have to, the salesperson doesn't have to be making twice that if they're working a 40-hour week before the payoff. So really that works out to be roughly in the $2,000 in the month. That's what it would cost to have your first salesperson. And I have found a number of times my return on investment, I can often get the salesperson paying for themselves within 14 days of them joining, providing you get the right person. Where some stations don't have a strong brand, sometimes it's going to take longer. And so it's worth having a realistic view of how fast your sales are going to get going. If you've got a station that's done sales in the past, but it's dropped off and you just need to pick it back up again, running this structure is going to get it going very fast again for you. If you've never done sales before and you don't have any client list at all, then it could be that your sales is going to probably take anywhere between 3 and 6 months to really get going. And so then you know that your risk or the lead-in time is going to be $2,000-ish times 3 months, which would be $6,000, or maybe even up to 6 months, which would be $12,000 before you start getting that return on investment. After that point, then it's all uphill. Well, downhill, I should say. Getting those metaphors wrong. Here we go. So let's keep on moving. The next part is getting that position description right. And let me just, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this. Just want to check, can you guys see this? Maybe if you could write in the comments whether or not it's seeing the browser or whether it's actually seeing this position description.
I'm seeing the position description for what it's worth. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much. This is a really simple position description that over the years we kind of refined. And this is something that I can make oh, it's too small? Okay, thank you. Let me, can you read that at all? Anyway.
Would it be possible to get a copy of it as well, Nathaniel? I'll include that in the things to distribute to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Beauty.
So basically, there's a couple of things in here that are really important. One is just putting in realistic expectations. With salespeople, you really want to provide accountability, because where there's no accountability, they're just not going to perform. I learned this, through trial and error in my first radio station, and this is just a really simple thing. I went from just telling my salespeople to go out and make as many sales as possible to setting a firm weekly target and then a monthly target. And when I started setting a firm target, You can see, by the way, the spelling mistakes in this position description. Anyway, when I started setting that regular target, we found that the salespeople doubled their performance almost immediately. So we doubled our sales by setting a clear monthly target. Not just that, but then we did a bit of analysis on what the potential is for a salesperson to make revenue, what we call revenue producing face-to-face appointments. And we found that most salespeople can make between 8 and 12 revenue producing face-to-face appointments. So basically that means a pitch. So they might take 100 phone calls to get the 8 to 12, or that if they're a bit more established, they might find that they can make 12 phone calls and get 12 face-to-face appointments. But it has to be a pitch. If it's not a pitch, then it doesn't count. And we expect that our salespeople will make 70% of those appointments before close of business on the Friday before. So those appointments are locked in before the week starts, and that's how they know. If that's happening, then we know we'll win. Equally, we also, with targets for sponsorship, the goal is to start each month with at least 90% of the target reached, and forward sales for the next 6 to 12 months to be typically around 70% of the target. So these are just some of the things that we've found over the years, and we can share this with you, that make a real difference. Getting the accountability right. But let me talk more about accountability too, because one of the things that I have found is a lot of managers don't feel that they are that confident when it comes to managing a salesperson. And what I would say is that you don't actually need to know how to do sales to manage a salesperson. What you want to do is make sure that there's clear targets that are achievable. You don't set targets that are unachievable. Don't set what you need, set what's actually likely to happen if they work hard in terms of budgets. It might be a nice idea to be able to work backwards from what you need and set that, but oftentimes that can, if it's unrealistic, it's just going to dishearten your salesperson and they're not going to perform. But in terms of accountability, what you want to do is have at least a weekly catch-up with your salesperson, a formal weekly catch-up, where you sit down and talk about what's happened in the past 7 days and what is planned for the next 7 days. So what are those appointments that they've got already lined up? Talk to them about how many contacts they've made, and that's where having a CRM is really important, because then you can get the data out of that about how many contacts they've had. We found generally a well-performing salesperson, like some of the best, will always hit around about 100 contacts per week for a full-timer. Now, if you are wondering what a 20-hour-a-week salesperson can do, you just halve it. So 50 contacts per week. That can be phone, email, or in person. Sometimes if I wanted to get my numbers up, I would go door-to-door and do sales that way. In different market sizes too, there is differences. So for instance, I know there's some people who are from sub-metro stations or metro stations. It's a different game in that sort of size market. The number of contacts you can possibly make in a week probably will be lower, and you might have to rely on doing more prospecting via phone and things like that. In your regional markets, in your smaller markets, anything below 200,000, then that 100 contacts per week makes real sense. But basically, you want to make sure that you are having that regular weekly catch-up. Otherwise, you'll find that your salespeople will underperform by about 50%. They really don't do as well if they're not talking to their manager regularly. Sorry if you can hear that V8 in the background, by the way. My office is right on the street here in Hobart, and yeah, we've got a bit of a rev head going past, if you can hear that. Also, one of the other things you want to do when you're talking to your salesperson, your job as their manager is to empower them. You want to empower them. by finding out what resources they need and making sure they've got them. Your job is to provide that accountability. So what they say they're going to do, they actually do. Just check in on that. One of your jobs is to protect them as well. Often salespeople work their butts off, and because they're separate from the station, they can often feel a bit isolated sometimes. They're very much worth looking after and protecting and making sure that they're being cared for. If you don't do these things, then you'll lose them kind of quickly. In terms of the sort of salespeople that you want to hire, we can talk about that in just a moment. Protecting people, and that includes one of the things that happens, and actually this is a really good point to bring it up. One of the things that happens with radio sales, particularly if you're just starting out in the market, you'll find your board will see the commission that's coming in for the salesperson, and at some point, if they're doing really well, your board are likely to say, or even yourself might look at their commission and say, this is unrealistic for them to be receiving so much income compared to other people in the radio station. The problem is, if you try and renegotiate their package in any way, you're likely to lose the salesperson, in which case the money they're bringing in that you can use to pay anyone else or do anything else at your radio station will disappear anyway. So it's really, really worthwhile making sure that you get your contracts in place correctly, make sure that you have your commission structures correct, but also once they're in place, understand that you can't really touch it unless the salesperson is happy with that. But even broaching it sometimes makes salespeople feel like they're not valued, and it can be a real issue. I've seen it happen at a number of stations where a radio station is starting out with sales, that they try to renegotiate commission down the track when the sales are going really well, because commission structures were figured out when, say, for instance, they were doing $3,000 in sponsorship, and now the station's doing $17,000 in sponsorship per month, and so the wages structure is looking really good for the salesperson and not as nice maybe for the station as they thought it might be. The problem is which would you prefer? Would you prefer 65 or 70% of something, or 100% of nothing? So you've got to really make sure you nail that one down early, and make sure you remunerate them fairly, because usually the growth in sales has come from their hard work. Anyway, let's move on. So let's talk about what happens. So the first 12 months, and I mentioned earlier about the first having a phone script. One of the things that I have done a number of times now, and is to get a phone script and give it to a salesperson. If they don't have any experience in sales, this is a highly recommended method. You give a phone script to a salesperson and get them to just be on the phones for the first 14 days that they're employed. And get them to even ring a list of people that it doesn't really matter if they mess it up, because really you don't want them to try and get the sale at that point. What you want to do is you want them to get used to approaching people, get them used to saying the right words, and once they're used to it, then you let them loose on the world. I used to not do this, but I gave this a bit of a try a couple of times, and I found that the growth in the sales is much faster if I can kind of think of the first 14 days as sales training. And it also means that the salesperson's in the office where I can, listen to them and overhear the phone calls and things like that, so that I can keep an eye on them, make sure they're being cared for, onboarded, but also by the time they get out to any face-to-face sales, they really know what they're talking about, because when you're doing phone sales, you can go through many more calls than you can when you're going face-to-face. So anyway, when I did this with, on a number of occasions, but one of the ones I'm thinking of in particular, we brought a salesperson on, we did this 14-day process, and then when I released them onto the world, in the first week, they did 7 sales, which was a great result. one of the things you want to do once you do let them loose onto the world, you want to make sure that they've got a package that's easy to sell. So once you've gone through that training process, the next thing is to get them to be making their first sales as quickly as possible. So that package structure that I talked about before, the club package, seems to work a treat. Basically, that idea that people, if they adopt early, if they get in now, then they can get up to 5 times what they might pay for. Later on, as more people join, that's going to diminish. But right now, we know for a fact that they're going to get 10 spots a day, which is, worth, whatever your normal rate card is. You can tell them what that's worth. But that first 3 months, really, you just want them to sell those 2 packages, the runner station version of that same one and the prime version of that same one, just to keep things absolutely simple. If they can keep on moving fast, they're going to do much better with sales. If they don't have to think about what they're going to sell, they'll be able to get to more people. And right at this early stage, what you're wanting to do is build as many relationships as possible and get as many clients on air as possible. Later on, you'll be able to do things like increase your rates and get more sophisticated about the sorts of packages that you sell. The first 3 months is usually the hardest. If a salesperson can last 3 months, once they get into their 4th month, then they're pretty bedded down and they're going to do well. But that first 3 months is hard yakka. So you really want to do everything you can do to help them get those sales. One of the things you might even consider doing, sometimes we've used incentives. So in the case of we're wanting to help one of our salespeople get going quickly, so we actually organised double passes to the movies for anyone who signed up to this particular 3-month package. And you can use those sorts of incentives on any package, really. And you can use incentives like that on like it might be tickets to the movies, it might be gold class tickets to the movies, it might be something more fancy like an iPad or an Apple Watch or something like that, depending on the amount that you're getting the client to spend. Basically, what I have figured out with incentives is if you work on a basis of about 10% of the package being the value, we found that the conversion rate if you use an incentive can be significantly higher, but then you've just got to make sure you can deliver those incentives. And sometimes doing a contra with, say, an electrical company is a great way of getting those incentives, like TVs and things like that for 12-month signups. That can be a really useful thing. Let's move on. So the next 9 months after those first 3 months is just more selling of those club packages, really. If you just keep on working on selling those club packages, you can, if you start to max out, you can actually increase the rate of those packages. And if you keep those, in the initial case, if you keep those club packages as 3-month packages, then you'll find that you'll sell them faster. You probably will have a few people drop off, but you'll also be able to increase your rates faster as well as people sign up. So one of the things that I want to touch on as we're talking about those steps, the 3 months, the 14 days, and the 9 months, is okay. What happens when you get that sale? Do you have in your radio station? Do you have someone who does production already? If so, do you have voices who can voice up those sponsorship spots? If you don't, then what I would highly recommend, and this is something that we did everywhere I go, actually, and all the radio stations that I have helped to grow their sales, I would highly recommend using a service like Abe's Audio. Let me just see if I can bring that over. Here we go. Abe's Audio. We used Abe's Audio for our sponsorship production. And what it meant was we could turn around those spots really quickly. Now, there's a cost to it, but you can either absorb that cost as part of the cost of sale, or you can pass that on to other people. Abe's, he produces a really good result, and it's consistently good. There are other places around that you can use, but I would definitely use I always recommend ABES for audio production. And there's another organization too that I would highly recommend, because you're going to get the production, the sponsorship spot made up for them, but you're also going to need to get a script made, right? So if you don't have someone who can write the script, then I would highly recommend outsourcing it to a group called Blue Box. Let me see if I can bring that up for you. Blue Box is a little agency. Where are we? Probably Blue Box Media. And I've used them many, many times for script writing. And the reason why I would use both ABES Audio and Blue Box for my script writing, ABES Audio for my audio production, is it produces a very consistent result that sounds professional for the businesses. Now, if they're spending, I don't know, $300, $400, $500, $1,000 per month with me, then spending $30 on the production that I can use for, anywhere from 2 to 6 months, that's easy. And the cost of the script writing as well, usually, I don't know, it's about $20-ish. You'd have to check out. I haven't checked out in the past 6 months, so they might have increased their rates. But both of them are highly worth it. And I would personally, I would absorb it. My strategy has always been to take away all the things that would stop someone from making the purchase. So I don't usually add it in. So I wouldn't normally get to the point after making a sale and say, yes, and your production is going to cost another $120. Normally I'd actually just fold those costs into the cost of the package. Now you can figure out how you're going to do that yourselves. But that's what I would do, because I just want to take all the friction, all the things that would stop people from making that purchasing decision away from making that purchase. But also, so one of the things I found as well, I can write scripts, and oftentimes I can write some scripts better than, say, Blue Box. But you know what I found? I, and also all the salespeople I've managed, don't write as consistently as Blue Box. Blue Box do often write what I call a 100% script, but they never go below an 80% script, whereas my salespeople, and even I, as I've been writing scripts, have dropped sometimes in quality down to a 65 or a 70% is what I call it. The reason why it's worth outsourcing to someone like Blue Box is because you're going to get a much higher, a more consistent professional product. And that, if you've got that consistent professional product, you're going to get more sales for your customers, and that's going to help you get repeat sales, so they're going to stick around. The other part to that too, though, is that your salespeople are busy doing sales. You want to get them to stay focused on that. If they get busy writing scripts, which is often the people who write the scripts is often the salespeople, then you'll find that they can get bogged down doing the script writing instead of doing the sales and getting new revenue in. So basically, my job as a manager or a salesperson is to free them up as much as possible to get out there. Now, just touching on that freeing them up part, some other things I'll just mention quickly in regards to that is that with freeing them up, that includes taking away anything from a salesperson that would stop them getting out. So with a salesperson, if you can find a way to cover whatever fuel might be needed for them to travel, I would highly recommend that. As oftentimes we've done deals with local fuel outlets or something like that. And you'll have to look into specifically what the fringe benefits implications might be for that, and maybe that's something in this next 30-day thing that we're going to do at the Radio Resource. We can actually get that information for you about the implications of fringe benefits tax on providing things like fuel and that sort of stuff for salespeople. So we'll do that for you. But also things like making sure they've got a mobile phone and make sure they can make phone calls, and make sure that they've got the resources in terms of the sales packages that they need, and make sure that they can make changes to those packages as they need them, make sure that nothing gets in the way from having them go out and make those sales, because anything that's slowing them down is going to be slowing your revenue, which is not a good thing. Now, I've touched on a bunch of things top level, and I am, if you are interested in getting into this further, over the next every Wednesday through March, I'm going to be doing another webinar, and it's going to be more of a more in-depth in each of these areas, talking about the exact how to create the carts and how to like providing things like that, those different resources such as the sales package. In actual fact, providing you can get me your email address in some fashion, I'll be able to point you to where you can actually go on my website, and you'll be able to actually feed in your station's information, and it'll shoot you a template that you can send off to your graphic designer to have those sales packages made up. We've come up with a bit of a structure and a strategy so that you can a bit of a structure for how sales packages sell better. So we've come up with a one-sheet style format that actually works a treat in terms of making sales. So we'll provide that to you, and you can go and use that your own graphic designer. We also I've talked to a graphic designer that we use for our clients, and he's also able to do that sort of stuff for you as well, so we can put you in touch with him, and he's used to doing it as well, which is kind of cool. So that's the top level stuff. So we're going to be providing that sort of information over the next throughout March. If you'd like to get into more of this at all, and then if you can drop your email in at this website, that'd be really great. And then I'll send you through any information about the resources that we've got. But what we'd also love too is, so we're kind of coming towards the end of the meatiness for tonight, and I'd love to kind of open it up if it's all right for some Q&A.
That's no worries at all. I've got a few questions here for you already, and just in regards to getting those email addresses from our attendees, I will do my very best to facilitate all of that as soon as we can. Gavin Ivey asks a question. This is a question we'll often get from community broadcasters. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it or not. Can you have a good indication of what percentage you should offer your salesperson for commission?
Yes. So, okay, this is a good one. I'm very pleased you asked this. So how we operate and how I've operated everywhere is to start by figuring out what's a fair wage in the market for someone that you want to retain. In a very small market, you might find that your commission isn't ever going to be enough to retain them well. But then in a really big market, you don't want to give them necessarily quite the same percentage, because otherwise they're going to be, taking away half the station. But normally, as a rule of thumb, in a very startup-ish kind of structure, we would normally do somewhere between 30 and 40% of sponsorship. But let me clarify that a little. We do a thing where we pay them the retainer, and they get 30 to 40% commission on everything above the retainer each month. So basically they pay back the retainer, and then after that they get the 30 or 40% commission. And so what that means is that, say for instance, if you're paying $2,000 as a part of the retainer, for the retainer in the month, then you'll find that if they had earned, say, $3,000 in commission that month, then they would get $1,000 in commission. Does that make sense? And it just seems to work well. You can do sliding structures, but I've got my personal policy is to try and make everything as simple as possible. Simple for me to run. I don't want it to be too complex, and maybe make a spreadsheet that does all those calculations and then find that I put a comma in the wrong place or something like that. make it so that it's easy for my salespeople to understand, because if they are clear about what money that's going to come in for them, they're going to be more motivated often. But, you know, if you're in a really big market and you've already got an established sales profile, then, you know, you might find that 10, 15, 20%, depending on the market size and what they're likely to write in a year, might be suitable. It kind of depends a little bit on what your spot rate's going to be. Yeah, and so work it out on a spreadsheet. That's something we can dive into. We can actually do some working through that this month as well, and actually maybe see if we can develop a bit of a spreadsheet for figuring that out, if that's useful.
Excellent. Well, the proposed figure there of 30% has meant that Gavin Ivey, the asker of that question, is now moving on to sponsorship. So well done, Nathaniel. You've shaped some lives here this evening.
Perfect.
Mike Kennedy asks, do you have any experience with employing marketing students from universities, because you both get them at a comparably low cost and it provides them with a useful experience?
I can imagine that's a good idea. Actually, that's a good question which can I elaborate around a little about the sort of person you want to hire? One of the things that I've discovered by doing some analysis is that the sort of sales person you want to hire is the one that's going to stay around the longest. Yeah. Because providing they don't get disheartened and providing everything else is equal, we found that salespeople's growth in sales just continues to be on a very even growth plane as they stick around. So just to give you an idea, and because a lot of people say that it's very hard to find good salespeople, well, I kind of disagree. I find that it's mostly because people don't know who they're looking for. We find that people that others would call good salespeople are usually bad. There is. I use a tool called Gallup Strength Finder to find out a little bit about the personality of different salespeople, and there's two types of salespeople that we've come across so far. Those who have what they call the woo, which is like the sort of person who can sell ice to an Eskimo. But they're not the sort of person you want, because they're hunters and they're not very good at servicing. Gallup Strengths Finder. The person you want is the person who has a high level of responsibility, someone who, when they tell you that they're going to deliver you results, you believe it because they are used to all their life delivering everything that they say they're going to deliver. And what you find is that people who have high responsibility don't look amazing often. They're not necessarily your most charismatic person in the room, but they are significantly better salespeople. They deliver long-term results. They stick around longer. You want loyalty over excellence in terms of sales, honestly. Like, I've hired a bunch of people who have been unemployed. I hired a couple of people who've been unemployed for 10 years because they had the right character. Another person who'd been unemployed for 4 years. And it's just because other people weren't seeing their value. But you know what was awesome? That loyalty thing means that those people who I employed are still there. They're still making those sales. And I don't think they'll go anywhere else because they found their thing and they're really good at it. That growth trajectory, if you have salespeople who are chopping and changing, you'll lose clients real quick, and you get a really rocky kind of up and down kind of sales profile. But if you can get someone who can stick around for the long haul, often they're really good. Highly recommend that. So marketing students, that's a long way around to come and say, not a bad idea, but I would say there's a high chance they're going to move on quickly.
Yep. Okay, I better get through these next questions really quickly because people are going to have to leave. A question there in regards to, have you ever heard of stations who are sort of there broadcasting to the same markets, getting them teams to team up, or their marketing people?
Brilliant idea. Yeah, it's an excellent idea. The only thing is, I guess you've got to figure out how you're going to do it. If I was going to do it, I would do a sales push type event, rather than necessarily doing it ad hoc. I would do an event where you sell the stations as a package together, and do a 1 week push. You get people into seminars to sell that thing.
Excellent.
The reason why, yeah, you go.
No, sorry. I thought you finished talking. Please finish.
The reason why is because if there's a person, if I'm selling for my station and I can sell another station as well, but I'm still not full on my station, I'm going to get a better return for my efforts by selling my station than your station. And I would like to sell your station, but if I've got to make my budgets, then I'm going to sell my station first, if you know what I mean. And so the normal structure means that you're not going to get great success with that probably. But if you have a concerted effort where you'll put the effort in to push all at one time, and it's all across the board, then you can do quite well with it, I can imagine.
Excellent. Craig Wright asks a very great question about strategies about how stations can place value on their online presence as part of the on-air package.
Yeah, brilliant idea. There's some. I'll give you another part to that as well. So have a look into this if you want to. You have a limited number of impressions on your website. You can sell your banners on that. But how about selling your audience rather than your impressions? So you can sell your banners on your website. You can sell your pre-roll to your live stream. You can sell Facebook mentions. You can sell this is the sweet one though. You can sell connection to your audience. So for instance, you can allow an organization to use Facebook advertising to sell to your audience, although through Facebook as their own business, or through a AdWords display platform such as AdRoll, where they follow you all around the internet. That business has ads that follows your audience around the internet, and that kind of really fits in nicely with the radio that they hear, but it's not on your website. And what's great about that is you're not limited to impressions. Does that make sense?
I believe it does. Hopefully it's making sense to everyone out there. You'll be able to watch the recording of this and hear it again if it isn't. This is probably going to be the last question. Thank you so much, everyone, for getting involved. This is from Ren, and asks, do you think infographics work as part of the media kit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been making a number of media kits for organisations, and we definitely use infographics. Anything to make it cleaner, crisper, nicer. It's a really good idea.
Excellent. All right then. Well, we've just gone a little bit past 7:30. A few people have had to leave. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much, Nathaniel Garvin, for all of the assistance that you've provided us here. We'll follow up with everyone with. I've put a link to the radio resource there in the instant message box, so people can click on that and get involved with that right away. But we'll follow up with all of our participants here and let them know about it. There is, when you leave the webinar, you'll be asked to sort of undertake a bit of an evaluation. I'm assuming 4.85 out of 10 for this webinar. What do you reckon? Nathaniel, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us here once again for the CBAA webinars, put together with the assistance of the Community Media Training Organisation. Thanks to all of our attendees. You are what makes community broadcasting great. And with that, this is Danny Chifley saying peace. We're out of here. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. For our March 14th, your guide to contributing to the National Features and Documentary Series, then March 28th. The Smell of an Oily Rag, 10 tips for broadcasting on a budget.